Namaste. Welcome to Mindfulness as Moving Beyond the Habitual Mind. So, for today's session, we're going to discuss the difference between awareness and thinking, and looking at this from the view within a little practice of our own, of closing the eyes and noticing if we can differentiate between the mind as thinking and the mind as observing or noticing that you can view your thoughts. So we'll just begin with a little bit of an Om to center a little bit here. So take a nice deep breath in, close your eyes. Om. 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 Namaste. So I would like to start off with doing a little reading from a quote, and I'm going to just put it up here on the screen so that you can see it. And this is a quote from David Frawley. Your own mind is your best friend or your worst enemy, depending on how you relate to it. The mind is part of your nature, closest to and most intimate to your inner self and being, but also connected to the external world and its influences. Much of what we call our minds is not ours, but the opinions of others. We must learn to go back to our awareness, for which the mind is but an instrument of expression. So this is a very, very interesting quote. There's a lot here. And if you look at this, we all probably can certainly relate to how your mind can be your best friend or your worst enemy. You can have the same day, the same period within even a few minutes, and it could be the best day ever. And then the next thing you know, it's the worst. And why is that? Is it because of the circumstances outside of you? Maybe, but still, how you perceive it or how your mind interprets that has a lot to do with that, and that is based on the process of your thoughts and how you're processing the experience of that external event, or perhaps something that is triggering you from an internal experience, probably from the past. And so this part of us where how we relate to it and the nature of it, it's the most intimate to your inner self and being. It really is this place where it is in between your mind and as being thinking and the awareness of yourself. These two things are not the same. They are different. And so we're going to do a little practice around that. So let's just take a moment here. We're going to close the eyes. So close your eyes. Okay, now open your eyes. And did you have any thoughts? Did you notice that you were thinking about anything particular? And the answer might be no, I didn't notice anything. So maybe you didn't have any thoughts in that moment. It's possible. But maybe because we weren't really also paying attention if we were thinking, that's also very possible. So let's try that again. Let's close our eyes. And see if you're noticing any thoughts. Okay, now let's open up the eyes slowly. So this time, maybe because you were a little bit more focused on recognizing it, maybe you did notice some thoughts. Again, perhaps maybe there was a moment there where you had no thoughts, but maybe you were having some feelings about something, or you were noticing some sensations within your body. And certainly these are also things that we ultimately think about, because your thoughts are as what you process, or how you relate to your experiences. So that's a part of your mind, to have thoughts so that you can navigate through the world. So when David Frawley then says, much of what we call our minds is not ours, but the opinions of others. So we're going to talk a little bit about domestication, how you were raised, what society has told you, and also how these things are very habitual, a part of our program, as how we think. And then based on how you think, that's what you do. And that is not the same as being mindful. And so the final statement here is, or sentence is, we must learn to go back to our awareness, for which the mind is but an instrument of expression. So the practice here that we'll continue to discuss for this pop-up class is that when you go back to your awareness, can you view your thoughts? So the practice that we just did you notice that you were thinking? Did you notice that you were having feelings? Did you notice that you were having sensations? And if the answer is yes, then there's something behind the scenes. Or you might even say, well, that's obvious. I know that about myself. Of course I can view my thoughts. What's the big deal? So then the next question is okay, well, how much do you have that awareness? Is it perpetual? Do you recognize that all the time, all day, that you're in your thoughts, and you have a connection of your thoughts while you're doing some kind of activity? And likely the answer is no, actually, not very much at all. I don't really know. Maybe, a few seconds a day, maybe a minute or two. I had a moment, I had a meditation moment, with meaning that I had an awareness of myself in a moment. And I was able to view my own thoughts or feelings or sensations, maybe in an activity or maybe with your eyes closed somewhere. The bottom line is that, like anything, we don't have a lot of practice in this department. You have lots of practice in thinking and doing and making sure that you get up and you go to work, or you do what you need to do for the day to take care of yourself. Brush your teeth, go to the washroom. All of these things, though, were things that you were also trained to do, in a sense. And you had to practice, obviously, how to walk. Some of these things, of course, are very essential for our well-being. Other things are maybe not necessary, depending on if they were things that we were brought up with in a way that we have to kind of get stuck in our own thinking, that it doesn't allow us to kind of move to a freedom of who we are, and we kind of get maybe bogged down with emotional stuckness is a word that I like to use, where you just kind of, a fear comes and you just don't want to do that, or something from the past kind of paralyzes you and says, no, I don't want to do that. But you know that you need to do that. And where do these things come from? Well, they come from, a lifetime of how we continue to do the same things over and over and over again, how we got maybe comfortable in a certain set of things. And most of the time, you didn't even know that. You weren't even aware of it. So it's not like we're blaming anyone here. We might blame ourselves, of course, sometimes. But how much practice and in the same kind of pathways and repeat of these things have you done in your lifetime? Well, it could be thousands. The way you think, the way you do things, the way you exercise, all of these things could be very repetitive. And therefore, in a sense, you could say you're really good at it. And you might even say that you're very mindful of it. But that being mindful isn't something that comes from thinking so much. It comes from awareness. And that's what we're talking about today, is how we can view that the mind is but an instrument to navigate us through the world. So if I have an awareness of my thinking, that means I have an awareness. Step one, I have an awareness. So when we close our eyes and we can notice that we're thinking, well, that's step one. Wow, there's a space there where something is beyond or can step back and view my thoughts. So we might call that consciousness as well, or awareness. Some people might call that your spirit. These things are there, but they're not there often. Even though it's always there, you're not very practiced at it because the momentum of the thinking is often so much. The impressions, the emotions that you have from the past cloud us or block us from even remembering that this is a possible human experience, to view our thoughts while we're engaged in activity, while we're engaged in a conversation. You can even notice that you're in the conversation thinking and maybe wanting to respond in a certain way. But that's not usually our experience. Usually our experience is that we react. And the reaction is classic habitual thinking or doing that you've always done. So then that's where you go to, because it has a lot of strength and power of practice from your past. So a lot of these things are, we might say, well, I was born with it, or I was raised that way. Yes, absolutely. And there's that domestication factor where you were essentially trained to do certain things. But that's it. We weren't trained to, or certainly not as much for most of us, we weren't trained to put our attention in this place where we can observe and notice, be a witness to our own thoughts. How much practice do you really have in doing that compared to all of these other parts of you? And you might be really good at certain jobs or things that you do. There's nothing, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but what this class or pop-up chat's about is having an understanding of the differentiation. I can be really good at something and I might be thinking, yeah, I was really focused, and I might call that very mindful, but maybe not from this definition. That were you aware also of yourself in the participation of your actions and your thinking? And you probably would say, no, not really. I was really just kind of focused, but I kind of lost myself in the object of that I'm, working on. And I wasn't really aware. I wasn't aware of my surroundings. I lost some awareness of myself, and that's fine. So the point here is that we need to continue to practice taking time, and often easiest to close your eyes, to then notice the space between you and your thoughts. So that's step one. Step two is you starting to also then recognize the nature of your mind. And the nature of your mind is very best friend or worst enemy. And it can be very judgmental. It has polarities of highs and lows. And as we view this with our eyes closed, we might not like what we're seeing. Where did that come from? I don't like this. This is not me. And how can I do this to myself? How did this happen? These aren't necessarily bad questions either. But if we can actually take a step back and then start noticing the nature of your mind. And the nature of your mind is actually very variable, very changeable. and actually very unstable, because the nature of your mind is processing. It's thinking. It has this processing unit to digest or navigate through the world. So having thoughts is not a bad thing. Thoughts are not your enemy, and they're also not your best friend. Thoughts are just thoughts, period, as part of a processing aspect of living. And they help us to direct our attention. It can help us to focus or interpret our environment, outside and inside. And particularly outside, just it's really as something that navigates us, takes us here, there, and responding in situations, relationships, and that is really it. But because we're not very practiced at that, often we are completely absorbed by our thoughts, and then it consumes us to just almost like an unconscious working through the life, where we just do what we do, and then the next day comes. And then if we do a little self-reflection, we might realize, well, there weren't really many moments. You might have thought you were really mindful and you were very successful in getting things done, but you still might be realizing that there was not very moments where I actually was self-aware in my actions. So the practice that of meditation, where we close our eyes and we can take some time out to view our thoughts and have space, then gives us a practice to, one, deepen our self-recognition of having space between you and your thoughts. Two, to really start to notice that your mind cannot be trusted, or certainly don't weigh so much in on your mind. Don't place all your bets in your thinking, because your thinking is very unstable, and the nature of your thinking is really just processing experiences and impressions and emotions from the past or currently. So if we look at it from that perspective, if we have an awareness, and then we are moving into the world, then we speak about that as actual meditation. Meditation in living or in silence. And that is really what mindfulness is. And then if we can view that, then this definition, interpretation of the mind being then the instrument, and we have the awareness within ourselves, or the consciousness, or for some people we call this the spirit, then now we can start to live life consciously or mindfully from this place. So it's really important to know the difference between these parts of ourselves. And a question that was just posted, that where do the emotions come from? Well, the emotions are a part of your feeling, how you feel things, and that's a part of a human experience. So we have sensations, we have feelings, we have thoughts, and then we have a spirit or a consciousness that can view these thoughts and emotions and sensations. So when an emotion arises, how do we then interpret it? Well, you interpret an emotion if you really start to pay attention, and you can take a step back. You can actually notice that your emotion rises up through your nervous system into your brain, and then when you are thinking about it, it creates a scenario. So this is a way of processing an emotion. So then it creates quite a drama around it. So somehow you have to process fear. Somehow you have to process anger. or happiness, even positive, negative emotions, it doesn't matter. It all needs to be processed. And it actually becomes quite entertaining in terms of the highs and the lows of your own mind and the process that it needs to work out or work through to digest these emotions that live within you. And that's just a part of human experience that helps us again to navigate or to work through these different experiences that we've had in our life. So there's nothing wrong with it. It's just a part of you. But to view it is what we would say is the mindful or the conscious awareness of noticing that you're processing an emotion through your thinking, which then creates some kind of movie-like scenario. And where is the director create? How is this such maybe an intense experience or such a beautiful experience or something that seems to be very terrible? It's almost like a book. And we can really start to notice that this is what's really happening here is the quality of your mind is moving. Okay, so thinking is moving, always on the move. And then depending on the amount of information it's processing can be intense or it can be a lot all at once. So that's just a part of the nature of it. And it can be very unstable and actually often doesn't even really make any sense. It's something that is unstable, moving, and had another question here. Somebody asking if this does that mean that my spirit is also unstable if I'm having this instability? And yes, in terms of the thinking is unstable, but if you recognize or notice your awareness or that observer, it's still. It's a place where it's still, it has, it's motionless, and it's viewing the motion, the movement, which is your thoughts or your emotions, feelings, sensations. And this is so important because if we don't know this about ourselves, we're missing a very key element. We're really kind of knowing about these other parts of ourselves, you know, the body, we know pretty good, we've practiced a lot, you know, your feelings, and then how they can thwart you, your mind, how it can just be all over the place at times. We're very focused, and then it changes again. But that is the nature of it. That is the nature because it needs to move for the processing to happen. So it just doesn't stay still. But what does stay still is your spirit consciousness or the observer here. So when you're noticing that place and space, but the disconnection or we forget is because there's so much on our mind. There's so much. And just getting back to that question about where do the emotions come from? Well, they are a part of us. And even if we think about emotions and that feeling part of ourselves, you know, there's nothing wrong with having feelings. That's part of being human. But the feelings are just a part that really lives within ourselves as this connection from a yogic perspective in Ayurveda between the mind and your body. So it's more on that energetic level and often can be helped through deep breathing as it kind of helps with the energy or the flow of the emotions, which kind of can get stuck in your body, or we can kind of resist it in our mind because it can be sometimes intense for us or overwhelming. So breathing often helps with that a lot. And but again, it all starts with awareness to even notice that that's an experience that you're having, and then using a tool like breathing to help you move with that. Not try to stop it, not try to distract yourself from it, but just moving through it and with it. So emotions, they're there. The spirit is in the background, behind the scenes, and it is very stable. It is what is peaceful, and often the place that we're looking to be a part of, finding that inner peace. We know what's there, but somehow we can't find it. Although we often see it in nature on a nice sunny day, but then your mind gets in the way, because when the weather changes, it's a good day, it's a bad day. The weather, as if the weather has an opinion. You make it your best friend or your worst enemy, because it's not going the way you want it to go based on your own perception of thinking, but not from the place of awareness. If you were in that place of awareness, you would know, oh, there goes my mind again, interpreting this weather and blaming the weatherman or woman on this this screen, like it's their fault, or it's the weather's fault or nature's fault. And really, it's just your mind trying to process some probably emotion, and maybe it wasn't going your way, the way you wanted it to, but it's just there and it's present. So not the weather's fault, it's just Mother Nature. So again, that's, to me, if we can, when you can step back and you can view this, and sometimes that's much later you might laugh at yourself, but if we can start laughing at ourselves during in these moments, we can it can be quite entertaining, and better than anything that maybe you could watch, or what even someone else created. But it comes from a place of practice. So we need to continue to practice through some kind of, whether it's a technique or it's a tool that you're using to bring an awareness to or view your thoughts. And lots of people say, oh, I can't do that. I don't know how to do that. And you can do that a couple of different ways with breathing, and that can be helpful. But to actually recognize your own thoughts and kind of be innocent to noticing the process of it often requires lots of reminders. And one way that happens is through you actually practicing it. Another way is through continuing to be supported through that and reminded by someone else. That can be very helpful, because remember, you're trying to establish a habit here of recognition of a place that you haven't recognized. So like any new practice, it requires effort. Accountability can be very good for that. And so we have this course coming on meditation in the mind, which can be very helpful with that. So thank you, everyone, for coming today and really asking a few of your questions. That was helpful as well. The last announcement here with this meditation in the mind course that we're offering is it's going to start on October 19th, Monday night from 7 till 8:30. And this really helps you to establish an understanding of how to use different tools for your body, one for your energy and emotions, breathing, and also how to do a seated meditation practice. But most importantly, how to just let yourself observe your thoughts without getting stuck in the thinking of it. So an effortless or easy way to find a connection that is there, and also then reestablishing your own experiences that you're having through a meditation practice, creating then less doubt and less resistance to what you're actually noticing when you do meditate with your eyes closed. It's very, very helpful. And so if you're redoing this course, we give you a discount on this. If it's your first time, it's very, very beneficial to to go through this and again re-establish a good momentum of strength to build not just a habit from a place of thinking, but a habit from awareness or consciousness. That is where we need to come from, a place of mindfulness. And then the instrument of our thinking then becomes much clearer and easier to navigate through the emotions, through the sensations, feelings, and even our own thoughts as we are in the world and our external influences. So thank you very much for joining me today, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Blessings. Namaste.